The factory was buzzing with activity that morning. Machines hummed in perfect rhythm, belts moved with precision, and the smell of metal and oil filled the air. Workers moved with purpose, eyes focused on their tasks, while engineers gathered around their stations, checking readings on computers and scribbling notes on clipboards. It was a place that ran like clockwork, but today there was a sense of tension in the air, something that could not be explained just by the normal hum of work. The CEO, a tall man with an energy that seemed to command the room without saying a word, walked through the facility. He had a reputation for being hands-on, never staying behind a desk for long, and he liked to see things for himself. His eyes scanned the factory floor with sharp attention, observing not only the machines but also the people. He believed in potential, but he also believed in testing it. Some would call him strict, others visionary. But everyone agreed that he had an unusual way of seeing things that others overlooked. As he walked past a large engine testing area, he noticed a problem. A particularly complex engine, one that was supposed to be a breakthrough for the company, was not working. Engineers had been trying for days to get it running, but it kept failing. Hushed discussions, frustrated sighs, and hurried notes were exchanged around the machine. But progress was slow. The CEO stopped in his tracks and frowned. He had little patience for delays, especially for something as crucial as this engine. Near the edge of the testing area, sweeping the floor and tidying up scattered tools, was a man most people barely noticed. The custodian was quiet, humble, and always in the background. He moved with practiced ease, sweeping without drawing attention, listening more than speaking. To anyone else, he seemed just like another worker whose job was to clean, not to understand the machines or the technical challenges that engineers faced. But today, something made him pause and glance at the broken engine. A flicker of recognition in his eyes that went unnoticed by the engineers busy discussing failure rates. The CEO's sharp gaze landed on the custodian, and without warning he said, "Why don't you take a look at it? Maybe a fresh perspective will help." The words were casual but carried weight. The engineers froze. Some laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. One of them muttered, "He's just a janitor. There's no way." But the CEO's look silenced the room. He didn't need to explain. His challenge hung in the air like a test. The custodian hesitated. He had never been asked to do anything like this. Machines like this were built on complex principles he hadn't used in years, maybe decades. But as he stared at the engine, memories came rushing back. He remembered a time when he had worked on engines, not just simple machines, but engines that required deep understanding of mechanics and engineering. Life had taken him in a different direction, but the knowledge had never left him. He took a deep breath, feeling a mix of fear and excitement. The engineers watched, some skeptical, some curious. It was strange, seeing someone they considered an outsider step into a space they thought was reserved only for trained professionals. They exchanged quiet glances, whispering predictions, some mocking, some genuinely intrigued. "He'll never get it," one said. Another shook their head but didn't speak, unsure what to expect. The custodian approached the engine cautiously. He ran his hands lightly over its surface, feeling the grooves, the joints, the connections. He listened to the hum of the other machines, imagining how this one should sound. His eyes narrowed in concentration as he traced the components, recalling the principles and techniques that had once been second nature to him. He could feel the layers of complexity, the subtle ways the parts interacted, and the small hints that something was off. It was like reading a story hidden in metal and wires, and he began to piece it together slowly. The CEO observed quietly, standing a few feet away, his expression unreadable but attentive. He had seen this look before in people who had hidden talent, those who had the ability to solve problems in ways others could not imagine. There was a calm in the custodian's movements that suggested knowledge and experience, even if it was dormant for a long time. A few engineers glanced at the CEO, wondering if he was serious. But the quiet confidence in his stance suggested that he knew something they didn't. Time passed slowly. Minutes turned into an hour as the custodian worked methodically, his movements deliberate, precise, and careful. He didn't rush. He didn't panic. Instead, he seemed to listen to the engine, as if it were telling him its story. Sweat gathered on his forehead, not from fear but from concentration. Small adjustments here, slight twists there, careful checks of connections and alignments. Everything was done with patience. The room was silent except for the low hum of machinery and the occasional creak of tools being used. The engineers began to whisper among themselves. Some were incredulous. "He's actually figuring it out?" one said quietly. Another leaned closer, eyes wide. "How is he doing that?" A sense of disbelief filled the air, mixed with fascination. They had all worked on this engine and hit dead ends, but here was someone doing what they thought impossible. It was a slow, steady unraveling of assumptions and prejudices, a quiet lesson in not underestimating anyone based on appearances or roles. The CEO finally stepped closer, curiosity shining in his eyes. "Do you need anything?" he asked softly, though it sounded more like encouragement than a question. The custodian shook his head, still focused, and continued to work. He was uncovering subtle issues, things that had been overlooked or dismissed, connections that were slightly off, minor flaws in alignment, areas that were hidden from plain sight. These were the things he noticed immediately. His hands moved with the precision of someone who knew the inner workings of engines, as if they were extensions of his own mind. By the end of the hour, something remarkable happened. The engine, stubborn and unyielding for days, gave a low hum of life. A small indicator lit up, a sign that the complex mechanisms were functioning. The engineers gasped. Some could hardly believe their eyes. The custodian had done it. Against all odds, he had repaired what no one else could. There was a mix of shock, awe, and silent admiration. The CEO's face broke into a slight smile, a rare moment of approval that spoke volumes. But the moment was not just about fixing a machine. Something deeper had begun to surface. As the custodian worked, subtle pieces of the engine revealed something unusual, a flaw that had been deliberately overlooked, a hidden error buried deep in the design. It was something that no one had noticed, something that had the potential to change how the company approached its technology. The custodian paused, noticing the anomaly, and his mind raced with the implications. This wasn't just a repair. It was a discovery that could unravel secrets long hidden. The room was quiet now, everyone holding their breath. The engineers who had doubted him from the start were now watching with a mix of respect and curiosity. The CEO's eyes were sharp, observing every movement, knowing that the custodian had just crossed from being a helper to being someone whose insight mattered. It was a rare moment, a turning point not just for the engine but for everyone present. Assumptions had been challenged and respect had been quietly earned. The custodian finished the adjustments, stepped back, and wiped his hands. There was a calm in his expression, a quiet pride that did not need words. The engine was running steady and strong. The challenge had been met, and in the process, something remarkable had been revealed. The CEO nodded as if confirming something only he could see. The staff, still processing the moment, began to whisper among themselves, realizing that talent and wisdom could come from unexpected places. The custodian, once invisible, had become the center of attention, not by ambition but by skill, insight, and courage to step up when given a chance. It was the start of something bigger, though no one fully understood it yet. The engine was working, yes, but the anomaly he had discovered hinted at a story buried deep within the company's past. Mistakes, oversights, or perhaps even deliberate concealments had been hiding in plain sight, and now they were slowly surfacing. The custodian, in his quiet, unassuming way, had not only fixed a problem but had begun to uncover a truth that could change everything. As the morning light streamed through the factory windows, it illuminated more than just the polished metal of machines. It highlighted a moment of transformation, a lesson in humility, and the beginning of a story that no one in that room would forget. The custodian returned to his sweeping, but the look in his eyes had changed. Something inside him had awakened, and he knew that this was just the first step of a journey that would challenge assumptions, reveal secrets, and inspire those who witnessed it. After the custodian repaired the engine, the factory floor was quiet in a way it had never been before. The usual chatter of engineers and workers had been replaced by whispers, looks of astonishment, and a low hum of curiosity. No one had expected what had just happened. The engine, which had refused to work for days, was now running perfectly. But beneath that achievement, something bigger was stirring, something the custodian himself was beginning to sense. The CEO watched intently from across the floor. His eyes were not just on the engine. They were on the custodian. There was a Quiet intensity in the way the man moved, a calmness that suggested deep experience. The CEO's instinct told him that the custodian knew more than he let on. He had seen this kind of confidence before, in people who had once held positions of responsibility and had chosen a different path in life. But this was different. This was someone who had been overlooked for too long, and now, in a single moment, was proving that appearances could be deceiving. The engineers were still trying to process the scene. Some were muttering among themselves, shaking their heads in disbelief. How did he know to check that connection? One whispered. Another added, we all missed it. We spent days on this. A sense of humility and frustration washed over them, but it was mixed with curiosity. They wanted to understand, not just how the engine was fixed, but how someone who wasn't an engineer on paper had managed it. Questions that had no immediate answers hung in the air. The custodian returned to his routine work, sweeping the floor, but he moved more slowly now. His mind was occupied not just with cleaning, but with the memory of what he had just accomplished. Thoughts of his past life, the time he had spent learning the intricacies of machinery, resurfaced. There had been a period when he had worked on engines similar to this one, back when he had ambition and opportunity to pursue his skills. Life had taken him on a different journey, one that required him to leave engineering behind. But the knowledge, the understanding, the intuition, it had never left him. And now, in this moment, it had been tested and proven. The CEO walked over and placed a hand on the custodian's shoulder, lightly but firmly. Good work, he said, his voice calm but carrying authority. I didn't expect this. The custodian looked up, surprised by the acknowledgement. It was unusual for anyone in management to speak directly to him, let alone with praise. A small smile appeared on his face, a mix of pride and humility. He nodded quietly, not wanting to boast, but feeling the warmth of recognition that he had long been denied. Yet the celebration was brief, because something else began to emerge. As the custodian worked on the engine, he had noticed a pattern, an unusual alignment, a subtle flaw hidden deep within the mechanisms. At first he had ignored it, thinking it was minor, but as he adjusted the components, he realized that it was significant. It wasn't just a technical problem. It was a sign that something had been overlooked or perhaps deliberately hidden years ago. He could feel it in the design, in the careful but flawed placement of parts, and a faint memory of past mistakes in similar machines came back to him. He approached the CEO quietly, indicating the spot on the engine where the flaw existed. There's something else, he said softly. It's not just about fixing it. This could explain why it kept failing in the first place. The CEO leaned closer, eyes narrowing as he inspected the area. He felt a ripple of curiosity and concern. This was unusual. It was rare that a hidden issue went unnoticed for so long, and even rarer that someone without official authority would discover it. The implications were enormous, not just for the engine, but for the company itself. Meanwhile, the engineers gathered around, drawn by the conversation. Some tried to explain why it was not possible to see such a flaw. Others remained silent, unsure what to say. The atmosphere was tense, charged with a mix of wonder and apprehension. They had witnessed someone rise above expectations, but now they were about to witness something even more startling, an unraveling of the past that had been carefully hidden. The custodian began examining the hidden flaw in more detail. Every adjustment, every careful inspection, revealed more about the nature of the problem. It was subtle, requiring both intuition and deep knowledge to understand fully. He realized that if this flaw had gone unnoticed, it could have caused major failures, delays, or even dangerous outcomes. And yet the design had passed every official check, every inspection. Someone had either missed it, or someone had intentionally buried it. The thought made the custodian pause. He had always believed in diligence and honesty, and this revelation felt heavy, as if it carried responsibility beyond just repairing an engine. The CEO watched closely, sensing the weight of what was unfolding. Tell me exactly what you see, he said. The custodian explained calmly, step by step, showing how the misalignment had affected the engine's performance and why previous attempts had failed. He spoke with clarity, without exaggeration, but with enough detail to make everyone understand that this was serious. Engineers listened, initially in disbelief and then with growing respect. They realized that the custodian's insights were not only correct but precise, and that he was uncovering something that none of them had noticed for days, weeks, or even months. As the details came together, the hidden story behind the engine began to surface. The custodian described the flaw in terms that revealed more than mechanics. It hinted at past decisions, choices made perhaps for convenience or cost-cutting, that had allowed this issue to persist. There was an unspoken implication that someone had ignored the problem, consciously or unconsciously, and that the oversight had consequences that extended beyond the engine itself. A buried secret, long hidden beneath layers of routine, was beginning to emerge, and it was being revealed by someone no one had expected to notice it. The engineers began to murmur quietly among themselves, some in awe, some in unease. They recognized that the custodian's knowledge and skill were extraordinary, but the deeper revelation raised questions about the company's history, its leadership, and its processes. It was no longer just a story of fixing a machine. It had become a story about accountability, recognition, and the value of experience that often goes unnoticed. The air was thick with tension, anticipation, and a sense that something significant was being exposed. The custodian, for his part, remained composed. He didn't seek praise or attention. He simply focused on understanding the truth behind the engine's failure. He worked carefully, making notes, pointing out connections, and explaining how this small flaw could lead to larger problems if left unchecked. His calm demeanor and methodical approach inspired confidence. People who had doubted him began to see a different side, someone who was not just capable, but who carried wisdom from experience, insight from years of careful observation, and patience that many engineers could not match in the heat of deadlines. Hours passed, and the engine continued to hum steadily under the custodian's attention. Yet the focus had shifted from the immediate repair to the deeper questions his findings raised. The CEO gathered a small team, quietly discussing what had been revealed. The implications were significant. Decisions made long ago, design choices, and overlooked issues. All of it was surfacing now, prompted by the actions of someone few had ever considered capable of such insight. There was a growing awareness that the company needed to rethink not only how it approached engineering challenges, but also how it recognized talent and valued the contributions of people who often worked in the shadows. By the end of the day, the custodian had done more than fix the engine. He had sparked a transformation in the way people perceived skill, experience, and potential. Engineers approached him with questions, hesitantly at first, and then with genuine curiosity, seeking to understand his thought process. The CEO, observing from a distance, felt a sense of satisfaction. He had seen the hidden talent, recognized it, and allowed it to surface. And in doing so, a path was beginning to open. A path that could lead to uncovering not just technical flaws, but truths about human potential, hidden history, and the importance of listening to voices that are often overlooked. As the factory lights dimmed for the evening, the custodian returned to his usual tasks, sweeping quietly, yet there was a new light in his eyes. Something had changed within him. He felt recognized, not just for his skill, but for the experience, judgment, and integrity he had carried all these years. And somewhere deep down he knew this was only the beginning. The engine was fixed, but the secrets it revealed were only starting to unfold. The challenge had sparked a journey, one that would test courage, reveal hidden truths, and change the way everyone in the company saw the world around them. The next day promised new questions, new challenges, and perhaps new revelations. The custodian, once invisible to most, had become a central figure in a story that was larger than himself. And for everyone watching, the engineers, the workers, and the CEO, it was a lesson that would not be forgotten. That talent often hides in plain sight, and that courage to act, even when underestimated, can uncover truths that change everything. The next morning, the factory was unusually quiet. Workers moved about their tasks, but many stole glances at the custodian, now regarded with a mix of curiosity and respect. Engineers whispered among themselves, some still incredulous at what had happened the previous day. The CEO arrived early, walking past the rows of machines with his usual sharp gaze, but today his eyes lingered on the custodian. There was an unspoken understanding. What had happened yesterday was more than just a repair. It was the beginning of a revelation. The custodian arrived with his usual quiet steps, carrying his cleaning supplies, but there was a sense of focus in his movements. that hadn't been there before. He didn't rush to the engine yet. Instead, he paused, taking a moment to observe it, feeling the vibrations and recalling the subtle misalignments he had noticed the day before. Something about it bothered him. While the engine now ran, he sensed an inconsistency, a deeper flaw that had been hidden so well that no one, not even the engineers, had seen it before. It was subtle, almost invisible, but he knew it was important. He approached the engine slowly, tracing the lines of its components with careful fingers. He could feel the slight resistance in a gear, the faint misalignment of a valve, and the way certain parts had been forced to fit rather than designed properly. The thought struck him suddenly: this wasn't just a mistake. Someone had deliberately covered it up. A secret buried deep in the design, and if left unnoticed, it could lead to bigger problems, maybe even failure of other engines built the same way. The custodian's heart pounded, not from fear, but from the weight of what he might uncover. The CEO, noticing the intensity in the custodian's focus, stepped closer. "Take your time," he said quietly, almost like a reassurance. The custodian nodded without looking up. He didn't need words. He knew this was the moment to be thorough. Engineers gathered, some reluctantly, others with genuine curiosity. They wanted to understand how he was able to sense what they had missed, and what his discoveries could mean for the company. The air was thick with tension and anticipation. Hours passed as the custodian worked methodically. He tested connections, adjusted valves, and re-examined the engine piece by piece. With every adjustment, another clue emerged. The engine, like a puzzle, began to reveal its story. Small scratches on internal components, subtle differences in assembly, and the careful placement of parts all pointed to a single conclusion. Someone had knowingly allowed this flaw to exist. He could almost imagine the decisions made years ago, the corners cut, the mistakes hidden, all culminating in this one machine. The implications were staggering. The engineers, initially skeptical, began to watch closely. Some leaned forward, trying to understand his methods, while others whispered in disbelief. "How does he notice that?" one asked. Another replied, "We checked every connection, every alignment. How did he see what we missed?" The custodian didn't answer. He continued quietly, letting his work speak. Each movement was deliberate, precise, and careful, and slowly the truth began to surface. The machine was not only repaired, it was telling a story of oversight and perhaps of something more deliberate. Finally, the custodian stopped and stepped back. His eyes met the CEO's. "This isn't just a technical issue," he said. "There's a pattern here. It goes beyond this engine. Others like it might have the same hidden problem." The CEO's face hardened slightly, the gears in his mind turning rapidly. This was bigger than a single repair. The custodian had not only fixed the engine, but he had uncovered a flaw that had the potential to affect the company's operations on a larger scale. The engineers were stunned into silence. The realization hit them slowly. Their work, their efforts over days or even weeks had solved the immediate problem, but they had missed the larger picture. The custodian, someone they had considered an outsider, had seen what they could not. Some felt embarrassment, others frustration, and a few even admiration. The factory floor was filled with unspoken questions and the weight of understanding that their assumptions had been challenged. As the day progressed, the custodian continued to examine the engine, not rushing, not seeking recognition, but deeply focused. He documented his findings carefully, marking areas that might indicate systemic flaws in other machines. His notes hinted at mistakes, misalignments, and even the possibility of intentional concealment. Every discovery brought a mix of anxiety and determination. He knew that exposing the full truth could cause friction, but he also understood the importance of integrity, of ensuring that nothing dangerous or misleading remained hidden. The CEO gathered a small meeting with engineers and senior staff. "I want all of you to listen carefully," he said. "This isn't about who fixed the engine. It's about understanding why it failed in the first place, and there are lessons here that go beyond technical skill." The engineers exchanged glances, some feeling defensive, others intrigued. They knew the CEO was right. The situation was bigger than pride or hierarchy. It was about uncovering truth, preventing future mistakes, and recognizing that insight could come from unexpected places. Meanwhile, the custodian worked quietly. He noticed patterns in the engine that mirrored older models, designs that had been used before but were prone to error. It seemed someone had replicated previous mistakes, covered them up in documentation, and moved on. This realization hit hard. It wasn't just about this one engine. It was about a system, a chain of oversight, and possibly decisions made to save time or resources at the expense of safety and efficiency. He felt a responsibility to ensure the truth was known, even if it created discomfort or conflict. The tension on the floor grew as engineers began to ask questions. "How did you know to check that part?" one asked. "It wasn't in any manual." The custodian smiled faintly, almost to himself, and explained carefully, describing his thought process, the way he observed the engine, and how experience allowed him to see what was hidden beneath layers of complexity. His explanations were simple, clear, and precise, making it easier for others to understand but also revealing the depth of his knowledge. He spoke as someone who had lived the work, not just studied it on paper. By afternoon, a more complete picture had emerged. The custodian had traced the problem back through multiple layers, identifying not only the immediate flaw but the sequence of errors and decisions that had caused it. It was a revelation that would have taken weeks for engineers to piece together, but he had done it in hours. The CEO stood nearby, watching quietly, recognizing the rare combination of talent, experience, and humility that had made this possible. The custodian had not sought recognition, but his work spoke volumes. The discovery sent ripples through the team. Engineers began to reflect on their own assumptions, realizing that sometimes expertise alone was not enough. Observation, patience, and willingness to question were equally important. The custodian, once invisible, had become a teacher without intending to. His actions challenged long-held beliefs, reminding everyone that insight could come from anywhere, and that humility and openness were essential in any technical or human endeavor. By evening, the custodian stepped back, exhausted but satisfied. The engine was stable, fully functional, and the underlying flaw had been documented. Yet the true impact of his work was only beginning. He had uncovered not just a mechanical issue, but a pattern of oversight, a flaw in thinking, and a lesson for everyone in the factory. The CEO recognized the moment as pivotal. It was not just about one man fixing one machine. It was about uncovering a truth that had the potential to transform the company's approach to engineering, leadership, and recognition of talent. The custodian quietly returned to his regular duties, sweeping the floor. But the change in perception was evident. Workers who had barely noticed him before now paused to watch, some offering nods of respect. Engineers whispered in low tones, trying to understand how someone outside their ranks could possess such insight. And the CEO, standing near the engine, reflected on the lessons of the day. That knowledge is not always found in titles or roles. That experience can be hidden in plain sight, and that courage, patience, and integrity often reveal truths that others overlook. The day ended with a sense of anticipation. The engine was fixed, but the questions it raised remained. Was this an isolated flaw or part of a larger pattern? How many other engines, designs, or systems carried similar hidden issues? The custodian had opened the door to answers that were waiting to be found, and the company knew that the next steps would be critical. The challenge had started as a simple test, but it had evolved into a journey of discovery, revealing hidden truths, challenging assumptions, and reshaping perceptions in ways no one could have predicted. As the lights dimmed and the factory grew quiet, the custodian paused for a moment. He looked at the engine, then at the people around him, and felt a quiet sense of purpose. What he had done was more than just repair a machine. He had reminded everyone of the value of patience, observation, and integrity, and deep inside he knew that this was only the beginning. The engine had spoken, the secret had started to surface, and the journey to uncover the full truth was just beginning. The next morning, the atmosphere in the factory was tense. The engines hummed as usual, machines moved with their mechanical rhythm, but the people working around them felt different. Something had shifted. Everyone knew the custodian had done something extraordinary, but no one knew exactly how far his discoveries went. Engineers whispered, glancing over their shoulders, trying to catch a glimpse of him as he moved quietly along the factory floor. The CEO arrived early, his expression unreadable, yet there was an intensity in his eyes that suggested he was anticipating something big. The custodian, as always, carried his cleaning supplies, but his focus was on the engine that had started it all. He walked slowly, observing every part, every connection, every alignment. The previous day had revealed one flaw, but he now suspected there were more. As he studied the engine, memories of his earlier experiences with similar machines resurfaced. Designs, shortcuts, and past errors he had once seen in his career flashed through his mind. He realized that the flaw he had uncovered might be part of a larger problem, something systemic that could affect multiple engines, and even the company's reputation if left unchecked. He began to work carefully, taking notes, inspecting components, and slowly uncovering inconsistencies that had been hidden for years. Each discovery led to another, like pieces of a puzzle falling into place. He noticed traces of modifications in parts, adjustments that weren't documented, and signs that someone had deliberately bypassed safety checks. It was becoming clear that this was no longer just a technical issue. It was a buried secret, hidden under layers of oversight and silence. The custodian felt a mixture of unease and determination. He had the skills and knowledge to uncover the truth, but he also understood the responsibility that came with it. The engineers began to notice his focused movements and started approaching him cautiously. At first, they asked technical questions, trying to understand his methods and observations. "Why did you check this part first?" one asked. Another added, "We followed the manuals exactly. How did you see this?" The custodian explained calmly, step by step, showing them how patterns, small inconsistencies, and experience allowed him to uncover hidden issues. His explanations were clear and simple, yet carried depth and insight that surprised them. They had spent years learning from textbooks and manuals, but here was someone teaching them through experience, observation, and instinct. The CEO, standing a short distance away, observed quietly. He could see the realization on the engineers' faces as they recognized that what the custodian was uncovering went beyond mechanics. The implications were bigger, deeper, and possibly troubling. This was not just about fixing one engine. It was about uncovering a hidden history, decisions that had been made in the past, and mistakes that had been ignored. The CEO understood the gravity of the moment. What had started as a simple challenge had now turned into an investigation, and the custodian was leading the way. Hours passed, and the custodian's discoveries began to form a clearer picture. The engine he was examining had been assembled with components that had been slightly altered from the original design. Some parts were worn beyond acceptable limits, while others showed signs of rushed installation. It was evident that these issues had been overlooked during inspections, perhaps intentionally, and that the company had unknowingly produced a system that could have caused serious problems. The realization was both astonishing and alarming. The custodian knew that sharing this with the CEO and engineers would be critical, but he also needed to ensure the evidence was clear and accurate. Finally, he gathered the engineers and the CEO near the engine and pointed to the areas of concern. He explained in simple terms what he had discovered, how it affected the engine's performance, and why these flaws had remained hidden. As he spoke, the room fell silent. The engineers exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that the custodian had not only solved the problem but had uncovered something far more significant. The implications were clear. This flaw could exist in other engines, and the company needed to address it before it caused further issues. The weight of the revelation was heavy, but the clarity of his explanation left no room for doubt. The CEO stepped forward, placing a hand on the custodian's shoulder. "You've done more than repair an engine," he said. "You've uncovered a truth that affects all of us." The custodian nodded quietly, not seeking praise but acknowledging the seriousness of the situation. His focus had shifted from simply fixing machines to ensuring that the company understood and addressed the hidden problems. He had always believed in doing the right thing, even when it was difficult. And now he had the opportunity to make a real impact. The engineers began to work alongside the custodian, examining other engines, reviewing assembly records, and checking documentation. They realized that what he had discovered was not isolated. It was part of a pattern. Multiple engines had similar hidden flaws, all overlooked or ignored in the past. The custodian guided them carefully, showing how to identify the subtle signs, how to understand the implications, and how to correct the issues. The atmosphere shifted from tension to collaboration, as people recognized the importance of uncovering the truth and ensuring that mistakes were corrected. As the day went on, more questions arose. Who had been responsible for these oversights? Were they mistakes or intentional actions to save time and costs? The custodian didn't speculate, focusing instead on the evidence in front of him. He understood that revealing the truth was more important than assigning blame. Yet the deeper he delved, the more it became clear that someone had intentionally allowed these flaws to persist. The weight of the discovery was immense, but the custodian approached it with calm determination, methodically documenting each finding and explaining its significance to the CEO and engineers. The CEO realized the full scope of what was happening. This was not just about repairing a machine or correcting an error. It was about exposing a hidden layer of the company's history, decisions that had been made without accountability, and the importance of transparency. He called a meeting with senior management to discuss the custodian's findings. The conversation was tense, filled with questions, concerns, and the need to act quickly. Yet throughout it all, the custodian remained focused, providing clear explanations, evidence, and guidance. His calm presence anchored the team, helping them navigate the uncertainty and gravity of the situation. By evening, a plan had begun to take shape. The company would need to review all affected engines, correct the hidden flaws, and implement stronger oversight to prevent similar issues in the future. The custodian's work had not only solved an immediate problem, but had sparked a broader transformation within the company. Engineers who had once doubted him now respected his insight, recognizing that knowledge and experience could come from unexpected places. The CEO understood that this was a turning point, a moment that would redefine how the company valued talent, observation, and integrity. The custodian returned to his cleaning duties quietly, but the factory had changed. People who had ignored him before now acknowledged his presence with respect, sometimes asking questions or seeking his opinion. He didn't seek recognition, but he had earned it through skill, patience, and integrity. His discoveries had revealed a hidden truth, challenged assumptions, and inspired others to look beyond titles and roles to see the value of experience and insight. The story of the engine was no longer just about mechanics. It was about courage, curiosity, and the quiet strength of someone willing to uncover the truth. As the night settled over the factory, the custodian paused for a moment near the repaired engine. He reflected on the day's events, realizing that his work had gone beyond fixing machinery. He had started to reveal a buried secret, uncovering patterns of oversight and decisions that had been hidden for years. The implications were vast and the responsibility was heavy, but he also felt a quiet satisfaction. By doing the right thing, by following his instincts and experience, he had made a difference. And he knew that the journey was not yet over. More secrets, more challenges, and more lessons awaited, and he was ready to face them with the same focus, patience, and integrity that had brought him this far. The factory lights dimmed. Machines slowed and the staff began to leave for the day, but the memory of what had occurred, the lessons learned and the revelations uncovered would linger. The custodian had become a symbol of insight, patience, and courage, showing that even those who are often overlooked can play a critical role in uncovering the truth. The CEO and engineers alike understood that the company's future depended not just on machines, but on people who were willing to see, think, and act beyond expectations. And the custodian, quietly returning to his sweeping, carried within him the knowledge that his journey was far from complete, that the buried secret he had begun to unravel would continue to shape the company for years to come. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of the factory, casting long shadows across the machines. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, a quiet tension that seemed different from the usual hum of work. The custodian arrived first, carrying his cleaning supplies as always, but today his focus was not just on his tasks. The engine he had repaired and the secrets it had begun to reveal were on his mind. He knew that the work he had started would now reach a turning point. The discoveries of the past days had changed everything, and now it was time to uncover the final truth. The CEO arrived shortly after, walking briskly toward the engine. His expression was calm but serious, and he seemed to carry the weight of recent discoveries. He had spent days reflecting on what the custodian had revealed: the flaws, the hidden errors, the oversight, and perhaps even deliberate concealment. What had begun as a simple challenge had grown into a revelation that,